Hi, Marianne. Welcome to Well-Oiled Operations.
Thank you so much for having me, Stacey. It's great to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited. So I think the way I first found out about you was somebody knew who I was and knew my love of systems. And they said, have you read Marianne Page's book? And I'm like, no, fill me in, tell me more. So I binged your book and fell in love with it. And I thought, oh, my listeners need to hear this story, this conversation. So before I start to ask you a bunch of questions, I'd love for you to share your background a little bit and just your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, of course. My background really is mostly with McDonald's, the obviously restaurants.
Yep.
I was there for crikey, nearly 3 decades. I like to think I look younger than that, but but yeah, it was a fantastic career. Taught me so much. And I didn't actually appreciate what they taught me about systems because when you're in McDonald's, you don't
Yeah.
really talk about systems. They just are the way things run.
Yeah.
But I left McDonald's about 12 years ago now, and I actually spent a little bit of time working with our blood service, the blood transfusion service, and that clarified to me that not every business, not every operation runs on systems, and in fact, some people don't know what a system is. So that actually pushed me to start my own business,
I love that.
and it's been a really fun ride. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and my thinking has evolved from when I started out. When I started out, I felt like I needed to just tell people exactly how McDonald's do systems because that will work for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's evolved to develop because of working with small businesses, understanding more about how they operate. So the first 18 months of my journey was actually learning how to not speak corporate to small businesses.
Yep.
Completely different language, different priorities. But it's really clarified to me that quite a lot of businesses have put off systems because they read about Six Sigma and Lean, and they feel that they need to take this huge sledgehammer to crack what really is a very simple nut for me, and I'm sure for you, certainly knowing what I know about the way you operate. It's really, they overcomplicate, and I think that's I love taking a business and explaining to them in simple terms, in terms that they would use every day, what they need to do to sort this, to get it right.
Yeah.
And that's what I do these days, day to day. It's lovely.
I love that. When somebody like introduced your book to me, they said she worked at McDonald's, and I was like, oh, I worked at McDonald's. And she's like, no, you worked in high school at the cash register. This woman like worked in McDonald's. So can you tell us what you actually did? Like, what was your role there for 30 years?
Yeah. So my first role was actually at the front counter and shoveling chips and flipping burgers in the days that we actually did flip them before clamshell grills came in.
Yeah.
And I was restaurant manager for a couple of years. Then I went into the training department, and I was training manager for a number of years. Then they asked me to set up their customer services department because they didn't actually have one at the time, believe it or not. And so I set that up. That was, oh God, that was such a brilliant time because I got to handpick all my own team, set up all of the systems. It was great. But I very quickly got bored of listening to people who had been missing their fries on an order or had cold hamburger. And happily I moved into a support services department that was really the internal customer services department for all of the head offices and so on. And when I left, I was in charge of a sort of a directorate of 4 departments, if you like.
Okay. That is incredible that you literally moved up from the register to this position. Wow. Like my mind is blown. So can you explain to people, because you're right, a lot of us we hear the word systems and we think this is going to be so much work. This is going to take so much time. Can you explain in the most simplest way, what is a system?
For me, a system is a simple, logical, and repeatable way of doing something. So as simple as it can possibly be, logical, so that if I walked into your business, I could understand and follow the logic,
Mm.
and then repeatable, so that somebody else can do it. And you know, McDonald's are the kings at this. I'd like to say queens, but it is quite a male dominated.
Okay. Yeah.
But they're amazing at this, because there is only one way to do everything in a McDonald's, and not just in the restaurants, at every level. You know, there's only one way to cook French fries. That's an obvious one. So almost wherever you are in the world, notwithstanding small tweaks because of maybe environmental health considerations or something, it's exactly the same. There's one right way to do it. Everybody follows it. Nobody would dream of doing it any other way. It's just ingrained. You learn that, and it gives you incredible scalability when that happens, because if somebody leaves you, somebody else can step in and take over the role. If somebody goes on holiday, or COVID was brilliant for shining a light on the businesses where there's only one person who can do a job. They got COVID. Oh my God, who's going to do the job? And it's really the flexibility that it gives you. But at one point in my life with McDonald's UK were opening a restaurant every 7 days. Well,
Wow.
you can't do that unless you've got a blueprint of systems and structure and development, development of individuals, the way people are trained. It is all systemized. And for me, when I work with a client now, the first thing I want to know is, have they got anybody in the team that they're settling for? Have they got the right team around them? Is there somebody who is just unsettling the whole team that they need to remove? But then it's, have you developed one right way to do everything? Have you captured it? Not on a piece of paper in a folder that nobody's going to look at, but on video, how-to videos. It's like I say how-to videos, people go, oh God, I'm not going on a video. It's like, no, it's not about you. It's about recording yourself doing the task as you're doing it, whether that's online or practical task. Having these how-to videos, training people how to use them and giving them the backup of the video, and then giving them feedback. And just those 3 steps, one right way, train them, give them feedback, and you can develop a consistent operation. But most of the businesses I work with, and I'm sure you find this as well, they've usually got one of the 3. They've spent months developing processes that nobody follows.
Yep.
They train people, but it's, I teach somebody my way of doing something, you teach somebody your way of doing something, Bill comes in and teaches his way of doing something, and you just end up with chaos.
Yep.
And most of the businesses I work with are not great at giving feedback, whether that's day to day or on a quarterly basis. And to be honest, Brits generally are pretty rubbish at giving feedback. You guys are much better at it.
I think in general, though, we think, oh, I don't have time for the feedback, but the feedback is training.
Yes.
So one of the biggest things that I hear the problem being right now is we just can't find good people with the skill sets we're looking for. And if that's true, then it sounds like the only other option is to start to train them yourself to get that skill set.
Absolutely.
So can you just explain that a little bit to some, like, what would you say to the person that says, we just can't find our people anymore? They're just not out there.
Yeah, I get an awful lot of that. Well, particularly now, there is
definitely
such an issue with hiring. I mean, but there always is, and in small businesses there is always something. And I was at a presentation the other day, and the guy on the stage was saying, just forget about hiring the right people. Until you've got 1 million in revenue, maybe even 5 million in revenue, you're never going to hire the right people. I was sitting there going, oh my God, please don't tell these small businesses that they're never, because to me, if you remember that hiring doesn't end until somebody's passed their probation, then you've always got the opportunity to hire the right people. Because if you hire to your values, you give them a structured probation period that teaches them what they need to learn, what they need to know to do the job well, and also gives them really honest feedback about whether they're making the grade or not, because generally it's, oh, they're just new, I don't want to upset them. And then make a decision at the end of however long your probation period is, 3, sometimes 6 months, about whether they get to stay or go. And don't settle for somebody that you know in your gut is not right for your team. And I think if everybody can keep that in mind, then they will end up hiring the right people. The skill set, there is very little. There are some professional services, you know, if you're a doctor, a lawyer, those sort of things, obviously you need skills, you need, you know, professional development. But an awful lot, and I don't know whether this is true for you as well, an awful lot of the businesses that we work with, there is very little that can't be trained almost from scratch.
Yeah.
You know, there's so little, you know, we're obviously some clients are professional services, but then that's a whole different ballgame anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you. I mean, when I look at certain people in my company that are thriving, I look at them and I think they didn't come thinking I am an expert in this category. They became it when they, just like you, like starting at the bottom and working their way up, because they transformed their skill set while they were here.
Absolutely.
And we forget, we're like, oh, I need another one of, you know, Kim or Bill or whoever, right? I'm trying to clone them. And it's like, but Kim didn't start like that, right? Bill didn't start there. They started more at the bottom and you've groomed them. And I think we forget that sometimes when we're looking for the next like A player.
Well, and actually business owners forget that they started at the bottom.
Yes.
Sometimes business, why can't they do that? Why can't they get it? Why can't they show some initiative? Well, they will if you hire them for their values and their attitude. If you give them good training, then they'll have the confidence to take initiative. But they can't just magic up initiative when they don't know really what you want.
Yeah.
And it's also true with training that what some people consider to be training, like, I showed them how to do that 3 weeks ago. Yeah, but it was like, here's how you do it. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, got it, right, I'm off to do something else.
And then never talked about it ever again.
Yes. And that was training.
Yeah. So, okay, let's kind of go down that rabbit hole. What is real training? Like, what should it look like when you've officially hired and you're onboarding? What does that process look like for you?
Yeah, well, it's for me, it comes in 2 parts, because I was always taught the ABC training of method, ABC method of training even, which is catch somebody's one-to-one, first of all, catch somebody's attention, break down the task so that you can teach it in manageable chunks, and then check that they've learned it. So ask them testing questions to make sure they've learned it. So for me, it's always one-to-one training. Allowing people to ask questions is part 1. Part 2 is then having your how-to videos, and we use for our sort of training system container. I discovered last year, and it has transformed my life and the life of my clients, a container called Trainual.
Yes.
Yeah. I love Trainual for the fact that you can store all of your how-to videos, your documents, anything that you need this person to understand, role by role within the system, so that they can have their app on their phone. And if they forget, they don't have to come running to you to go, oh, how did you do that? They can just watch their how-to video. Yeah, of course, I forgot to press that button. And it's just, it makes having that sort of logical, again, for me, it does come back to simple, logical, and repeatable, because it's a simple system to use. It follows a natural logic that makes sense to everybody, and it helps you to achieve that consistency. So it's the one-to-one training backed up with the ongoing tools that people can use to remind themselves of exactly how to do the tasks.
So good. I feel like we are a very well-oiled machine, but even as we grow, we break our own systems. So we have to, recreate them from scratch sometimes.
Yeah.
And we just had somebody go on vacation, which is always a great time to test your systems.
Yeah.
And we discovered our biggest learning lesson was the systems were there, but the team didn't feel confident performing the system without that person being there.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, we have the system. It's documented. You even knew what it was, but it was like, they didn't trust. So do I really just follow the system? Like, is this really what I need to do? And it really was eye-opening for me to say, okay, it's not just good enough to have the system. Let's actually have them start to try the system themselves while this person is still working, but let's let them take over for a week and actually start to train them that way. So you just learn so much.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people can get so frustrated and say in that situation, like, systems don't even work. It's like, well, no, you've got to learn to work the systems and use the systems.
Exactly.
And it's a process, but it's a process worth putting time and effort into because you'll reap the rewards on the next vacation or the next time that person leaves or whatever it is.
Definitely. And it's one of the great things about, and it is very, very much the restaurant side of McDonald's.
Yeah.
But developing, instead of having people who were just the fry people or just the burger people or just the front counter people, that everybody learns everything. And everybody gets to do everything on a rotation basis, so they become skilled in all of the areas.
Yeah.
Obviously, in a more office-based environment, that is not always possible.
Yes. Yeah.
Having that backup.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've been doing is kind of having backups, for if social media is out, who is the person that typically jumps in to replace, like, right. So even just having one backup, but you're right. I like the idea of a few people understanding and knowing, because you just never know. And then you're more diverse, you're more secure if something happens. And it's just, it's such safety, security. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, we were always challenged at McDonald's to replace ourselves. Whatever role we were in was to develop our replacement, which sounds to most people like a really scary thing to do.
Yeah.
But when you do that, it really opens up opportunity. If I've developed this person to do my role, so what's next for me? What can I be doing? And particularly in a growing organization, there is almost always opportunity. There's always, whether it's a sideways step or a secondment or an upward step, there's always another challenge to be taken on. You just make yourself more useful, don't you?
Yeah. And you definitely attract the growth-minded person who is secure enough to train somebody, but then I want to go up or I want to do something else versus maybe somebody who's not great at it, but they're also stuck in that lack. That's so interesting. Now, I would ask you, like, what is something that, like, do managers make it more difficult than it needs to be? I think a lot of times I see that a lot, or they become the new bottleneck. So usually the small business owner is the bottleneck. They've got a tight grip. Then we finally get them to hire managers. And then the manager becomes the new bottleneck of like, but I'll just do it myself. It's just faster when I do it myself. What do you see in that space?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because at McDonald's, there is an amazing managers development program that goes on in like 5 levels. As you work through, you just keep moving up the levels. And it was seen as, we do not want managers to be bottlenecks ever. We need to give them all of the help and support that they need in order to do this job well. And in nearly all of the businesses that certainly that I was going into, but still these days now, managers had either been hired in who didn't know the culture, the business, had experience of being managers, but on their CV didn't see how good they were at it. And they just had, I've been a manager for 12 years. What would your team say about those 12 years?
Right.
So they hire them in, or they just promote somebody who was great at their job and go, here, you be a manager. And almost invariably, their development consisted of going on a one-day course or a week-long course. If they were lucky, maybe a month-long course. But those courses generally didn't allow them to go and practice something, come back and check. And it was just driving me mad, because bad teams destroy bad managers, sorry, destroy a good team.
Yeah.
They almost make it impossible. I went into this amazing business. They made gorgeous leather jackets and promoted them by giving them to influencers. Like
Okay.
Justin Timberlake went on stage with all their jackets on. It was like, whoa. Anyway, gorgeous. And it was a really young business, and they had young managers. And the most senior manager, I think she was 24 at the time.
Mm.
And I went into their office, and it was like the grave. And bearing in mind, this was like a vibrant influencer-based organization. It was so quiet, and she was snapping at people if they spoke. And I thought, oh my God, what you're doing? Your job is not to be the prison guard.
Mm-hmm.
It's to get the best out of everybody, to help them fulfill their potential, to inspire them. Keep them on track, but they don't need to be sitting in silence. And this, it just took me back to the development that I went through as a manager within McDonald's. And I thought, they're just not being taught the basics, and they're not being given the mentoring and the feedback, and able to come with challenges and go, because their boss put them there largely because they didn't want to deal with the team. They wanted somebody as a barrier, as a block. Yeah. And so because of that, we developed our managers development program, and I wrote another book called Mission to Manage, because it's not an impossible task.
Yeah.
For me, it was one of the joys of being in part of a big organization, was that you got to develop team after team after team as you moved around the business. And most managers hate it because they've lost their friends in the team, or nobody likes them, or they just feel like they are a policeman rather than a motivator and a developer. And I do think there's so much that managers, when they're the right managers in the right team, they can just achieve so much as a team. The we and us, rather than the me and them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the things too is you put this gatekeeper in between the owner and the team. You have the manager, but if it's the wrong person and they don't feel comfortable talking to their manager, and you've said you've got to go through her before you can come to me, all of a sudden you start losing really good team members.
Yeah. It's quite frightening, that. And one of two things happens: either the manager is completely undermined by the people just bypassing them, or the team leave. Good people.
Okay, that just made me think of another question. I have a client who said she has a manager, and the manager is really more on a friend level with them. She's not holding accountable. What do you do when you have a manager that you're settling for, like you had mentioned, but maybe it's somebody who's been with you a long time? It could hurt company culture. What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that I always say is look in the mirror first. What could you have done better? What training and development have you given them? What feedback have you given them? Do they even know that they're not meant to be friends? Have they? Do they get to network with other managers who they can talk through the challenges that they're facing? And if they are the wrong manager, then is there a way of moving them sideways, moving them back into a role that they loved, without it? The upsetting of the team culture is always interesting. But sometimes those hard decisions, it's like quite often, I'm sure this happens to you, you start working with a business and it's really obvious who or what the problem is.
Yes.
And that as soon as that person leaves, everything's just going to open up and blossom, and the people who perhaps were hiding under a bushel will just spring into life. And that everybody is looking at the business owner going, when are you going to sort this out? We can all see it. When are you going to do something? So it's I always ask, particularly business owners, just to say, imagine if you had the right person in that role, the person that would be enthusiastic and just take ownership for it and take it off your plate. Just imagine you wouldn't have to take them home and talk to your other half about them.
Because that's what they do. They're venting. They're like, oh my goodness, today they did this. And
Yeah.
yesterday this happened, right? And it's so funny because I think a lot of the teammates probably think, why doesn't the boss see this? But what I've noticed is the boss does see it. They just don't want to have the hard conversation.
Yeah.
They're hoping it just magically fixes or goes away. And I've never seen it magically go away. You
No,
have to have that
absolutely.
hard conversation. You're just prolonging it.
The thing is as well though, if you've got a culture of giving feedback, if you are used to giving feedback day to day, and take away that, I was just talking to somebody about this morning, that idea that putting somebody in performance management means that they have done something really bad and they are going to be taken through a series of disciplinary meetings almost. Whereas for me, and what I was brought up to understand performance management, it's about inspiring and motivating somebody to improve performance. So the sooner you give them very straight and direct feedback, the better they will be going forward. And if they're not, then you need to part company.
Yeah.
But it's this idea that it's, you know, I hate the expression constructive criticism, because the word criticism is inherently negative. You can't really give somebody constructive criticism because you're criticizing me.
Yeah.
No, I'm giving you constructive feedback and it's going to help you to improve your performance. Or I'm going to give you praise, even better.
Yeah.
But just developing that culture of giving feedback means that your training doesn't go to waste apart from anything else. If you're going to invest in developing one right way and then training people, you've got to give them feedback. Otherwise, you may as well not bother.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like, I mean, I don't know that there's like a number or a percentage, but like, is there a certain guideline for how much the small business owner should be pouring back into their team versus just like solo working on their own activities throughout the day? What do you recommend or tell people?
Frankie, that's a tough one. I'm not sure I could give you a percentage, but I do feel that we talk about protecting your own time as a business owner and giving yourself time to work on the business, and maybe doing 90 minutes first thing in the morning on something that's going to move the business forward. But then having team time twice a day where your team can come to you with any questions they've got, any challenges, or where you can actually set one team time aside to train somebody and something, particularly if you want to delegate a task, something that only you can do. Oh my Lord, there's way too many things that only business owners can do. Then having those, 2 times a day, it might be 90 minutes, it might be only two lots of an hour. But having that every day gives people the understanding that they can still come to you,
right?
But they're going to come to you with, we talk about being solutions focused. I'm sure you talk about that a lot as well. Talk about being solutions focused. Don't come to me with a monkey that's going to jump from my back onto your back onto mine. Come to me with a monkey, but with solutions to getting rid of it. And I think you can really use team time. You can really structure team time so that that's what you get. You get your team coming to you with, I've had this problem, I've got this challenge. These are the things that I think would resolve it. Can I have your feedback? Well, what would be your best guess? Well, it would be this. Yeah, great. Go do it. And it just then encourages them to take ownership.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing I think a lot of our clients want is they want to release some of the ownership, but truly trust the person they're giving it to. And this is all how you get there. It's these little baby steps that will take some time, but will be so worth it.
Yeah, trust is absolutely huge. We use a matrix that looks at the time somebody's been with you, how you rate their performance, and how much you trust them. So sort of 3 axes to it. And because somebody could be an absolute hotshot in their first 3 months, really perform, and then fall off a cliff once they pass their probation. And how much do you trust these people to do the job without supervision is a real key metric that excuse me, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that every business thinks about it in that way. They have their KPIs, and as long as the KPIs are being hit. But, I've had people who in the past who've been amazing at achieving all of their goals, but they would walk over their grandmother to do it. They just, it's got to be about how they do things, and how much you trust them, and how much they share your values, as well as them nailing their KPIs, nailing their goals.
Marianne, this has been so good. I could talk systems with you all day long.
Yes,
I know
too.
this is just like such a fun conversation. Where can people find out more about you, your books? Fill everybody in.
Well, the best place to go really is our website, which is very straightforward. It's mariannepage.com. And there you'll find the books. You'll find out more about what we do and how we work with our clients, our done for you service and our programs. There's a way for everybody to work with us if they want it.
Amazing.
And time zones are not a barrier for us. I'm sure for you.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Marianne, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here and just sharing. I really hope this gets some of our small business owners just like loosening up a little bit, that tight grip.
Fantastic.